Finally, after 4 long months of waiting, Telltale's The Wolf Among Us Episode 2 Smoke and Mirrors has been released. The Wolf Among Us, of course, being based on the Fables comic book series from Bill Willingham, follows a character named Bigby Wolf, who is actually the big bad wolf, who is the sheriff of Fabletown. His job is to protect the residents of Fabletown, and of course the residents are fables themselves, just like Big Bad Wolf himself. You have Snow White, you have Beauty, you have Beast, you have Little Red Riding Hood, and so on. We followed Bigby in the first episode as he investigated the murder of a fable, which never usually happens in Fabletown, so of course that's very strange. So he has to figure out who this murderer is and stop him or her before they murder any more fables. And in this episode, it's all about the story progression and the character development, because we get to see some twists and turns and some really good dialogue to actually flesh out some of these characters. And we actually start to really, or I should say me, I can't speak for everybody, but I started to really understand a lot of these characters and actually start liking some characters I didn't really care for in the last game. But let me just say this, Bigby is an awesome character. He was really cool in the first one, but you didn't really understand how he felt too much because it was the first episode. Here you're actually really seeing who he is as a person or as a fable. So he's actually a much more fleshed out character in this episode. And of course the story, I can't spoil too much, that's why I'm not really talking too much about the story. Let's just say there's a lot of twists and turns, there's a lot of interesting characters that come up that we haven't seen before, and there's a lot of really good dialogue in between. Now, what's not in this episode too much is the action from the first one. In the first episode, there was like 3 or 4 big action scenes where, of course, just like The Walking Dead, you have to like press a button at the right time or move the reticle over or something, or like flick the left stick left to dodge or something. Here there's only really one action scene that I got in my playthrough, and that's it. Even though this episode's pretty much as long as the first episode, there's only one big action scene. What everything else is all the dialogue. You get to make your choices. There's a lot of really good, very hard to make choices in this episode, and of course a lot of twists and turns like I keep saying, but again, it's all about the story in this episode. But even though there is an absence of action, I mean, there is one action scene, but it doesn't last very long. It's still, like I said, the story, the development of the characters, all that really makes up for it completely. And also, there's a couple of actual investigation scenes where you have to actually figure out what's going on, and you have to piece clues together, which is actually kind of cool. But I do have a negative of this episode. This is probably the worst performing episode of any Telltale game I've ever played. Any of the Walking Deads and, of course, the last Wolf Among Us. This one chugged unbelievably bad, and I played this like the second day it came out on Xbox Live, so there was really no excuse. There really wasn't. They should have patched it, or they should have just made sure that it was good. It was 4 months. They had 4 months to make this better. But somehow it ended up being worse. Maybe it's just the Xbox Live version, I'm not sure. But I had a lot of loading problems where it actually took like a minute or two for it to load. And when it loaded, it would be still very stuttery and stuff. Luckily, when you actually get into the gameplay and you're actually investigating and talking to people, and even the one action scene you get, it's not. But when it's actually loading to a cutscene or something, it's pretty bad for the most part. But besides that, I really have no other problems. The characters all have really good chemistry. The voice acting is fantastic, just like every Telltale game. The graphics look like it came straight out of a comic book, like I said before. And a premise that is extremely intriguing, and the story definitely capitalizes on that. A detective story based around fairy tale characters. Just genius, and this story, I cannot wait for it to progress, and I cannot wait until episode 3 of The Wolf Among Us. So there you go, there's my review for The Wolf Among Us episode 2 Smoke and Mirrors. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you and goodbye.